Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about five-way spread voicing. Similar to four-way spreads, except of course now we're dealing with five voices instead of four, but the function is the same. Usually these are used as pads. They can also be used, as kind of a general saxophone section voicing. Sometimes I'll use this coupled with the brass in a shout section, kind of really fills it up nicely because of that root that we're going to have in the lowest voice. But this one's a little bit different than the four-way in that there are three distinct methods that we can use to create these. So the first one, the first method is the formula method, or that I think I just call it the formula method. But basically it's very similar to what we did with the four-way spread in that we sort of have a definition, for each voice of the voicing. So, here I have them listed. So our first voice can be any available tension, which I put here as the best. Generally, if you have a tension in the lead, it's going to be easier to voice things. That's going to sound a little bit better, but it's not unprecedented to have a five, a three, or a seven there. If there's a melody note that you hear that's got to be one of those, let's go for it. The only thing we can't do if we actually want it to be a five-way spread is we cannot have a root. And frankly, we can't have a root, a non-substituted root, that is, in any of the voices except for our fifth one, because then we're going to have two of that same note in there, which we would like to avoid in this situation. So generally, I'm not going to put a root there. If I do put a root there, I'm probably going to think of it as some other sort of voicing, which is, once again, not unprecedented either. So notice that the first voice and the second voice both have kind of the same thing listed here, right? So, once again, if you can have a tension here in the first voice and a tension in the second voice, you're going to be in pretty good shape at that point, because that is then going to put the third and the seventh in the third and fourth voice, which is a really, really good place for them to be. We've even sort of noticed that in our other voicing techniques. If we have the third and the seventh in the lower voices, they tend to sound the best. And then, of course, our fifth voice is going to have a root. So since we have the five voices here, the lead note actually can be a little higher than in the the four-way close, in that we can maybe go up to this top F, the F at the top of the staff here. The lead notes that I chose here are quite a bit lower than that, but if you needed to go up that high, you could. Same thing here with the interval between the lowest two voices, so between the fourth and the fifth voice. Usually a tenth or a seventh are usually your best choices. Sometimes a fifth or a third could work too. So let's go ahead and create some using these lead notes that I came up with here. This is actually the same chord progression as I used on the four-way spread voicing video. But I chose some lead notes that are higher than the ones that I chose there. So for instance, look at the one here. Now look, I kind of even broke my own rule here, or broke my own idea of the best lead note. But I'll tell you what, fifths are probably your next best choice in one of these two one of those two voices. So available tension is the best one to choose, but then the fifth is probably the next best one to choose. So here I have a fifth, and this one's going to work out really nice. So my fifth is covered. So my second voice, then I can have any available tension. If I'm just kind of going down here and trying to figure out, well, what might be the next best tension to put in there? Well, I would say probably the ninth in this case, right? Ninth, subbing for a root. Then our next one down could be a third or a seventh. The third would be a little bit too far away, so I'm probably going to just go ahead and put in my seventh. Then let's switch over to the bass voice here, and let's see, I'm going to go ahead and put in, since I have my seventh, to make the voicing complete, I have to put in a third. So this is looking kind of similar, right, to our four-way our four-way spread voicing, except we have that one extra voice on the top. And we also discovered that, in these spread voicings, it's kind of nice to put that sort of lower root in there. And I could put the D here, but once again, it's not going to be as spread apart, I guess, for lack of a better term. Also, think about the range of your baritone sax. a baritone sax generally can go down to that concert C, so we might as well utilize that range of the baritone sax. The only caveat here is that that low D concert is going to be a little bit hard to play softly. So this would be a spread voicing that's got a little bit of power to it because of the intensity of that low D. But once again, let's look at this over here on the keyboard. So you'll see in my left hand, I have that beautiful 10th interval once again. Over here, it's kind of like with the four-way spread, I had that C and that E. But then on top here, I'd have an A. And let me click off of this for a second. Just a really nicely spread out voicing. Great, great piano voicing. Especially for, some sort of solo piano texture or something, if that's your lead note. This has all the information that we need to know, and it's got the pretty notes in there. It's got the root in there. It's got the third and the seventh. It's all the information that we need to know. So once again, great voicing for a pad. Let's move on to the next one here. And, when I was putting this together, I wasn't thinking the voice leading, but let's think about some voice leading for a second. So look, my voice here is going up. And this B flat on a G7, it's not a third, right? It's a poorly spelt sharp 9, but guess what? You're going to see that a lot. So that's a sharp 9, which is an available tension. Next one down, maybe can we look for another available tension? Well, look, here's one spelled for you right in the chord symbol. How about a flat 13 below that? Let's just go ahead and put that in, a flat 13. That works out really nice. And then as we're going down, if we want a voice lead from this one to this one, probably our next good note down would be that B natural, which is our third, right? Third voice could be a third. And then a little voice exchange here, right? We actually are going to keep this F. That's going to be the seventh of our chord. And then to complete it, we're just going to drop in that G on the bottom there, right? So if we look at this on the keyboard, so here was the first voicing that I played, right? So the second voicing, my lead note is moving up to this B flat, and watch how everything else is going to voice lead just very nicely. Right? Nice conservation of motion there, right? So look, these two voices just went down a half step. This one went up a half step. This one stayed where it was. And then look, I just sort of use my middle finger here. Watch this. Hardly moving my hand at all. Conservation of motion is a great thing on any instrument, right? And that's a beautiful 5-way spread voicing. Let's move on to the next one here. So we're going to take that lead note down a half step. And now we have a C13 chord with a sharp 11 in there. We have a couple of choices here if we wanted to put another tension. So we have a tension in the lead, which is the natural 13. We could put in a sharp 11 here, or we could put in a 9. I like the sound of the sharp 11, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the sharp 11. Next one down, it could be a third here. We could switch up our hierarchy of thirds and sevenths, but I think with the voice leading, I'm going to go ahead and make that a B flat, and then voice lead down to an E here. And then I'm going to use that low baritone sax, and I'm going to go ahead and put in that low C concert, which transposes to an A on the baritone sax. So this is a nice sounding C7 with a sharp 11, or C13 with a sharp 11. So here's my lead note coming down a half step here. Then there's my F sharp, tension, seventh, third, root. Very nice sounding chord. Even though we have this kind of large interval here between the B flat and the F sharp, that's kind of neat. And it's actually, when we put that in context, this voice here is kind of doing a neat little thing. It's going, right? It's got a nice little melody going on with it. So, that's something definitely, to look for, and we've talked about that before as far as, 4-way voicings and drop 2 voicings. And, when we're moving them around, especially when we have eighth notes, we want to make sure that the inner voices have something interesting to play, right? So that's something to look out for as well. Let's move on here to the next one. So the lead note here, I have a flat 9 in my lead. Next one, maybe I want to look for another available tension. There it is, right, right in the chord symbol. I'm going to go ahead and go with that 13. That's going to give me a beautiful sound. And watch, there's actually going to be a really neat thing that happens here. If I keep voice leading, right, I'm going to get an A in that third voice. Next voice down, I'm going to get an E flat, the 7th of the chord. And then below that, I'm going to get my root. So this actually ends up being really neat. It's kind of disguised right now because of this is a G flat. But look, if I turn that into an F sharp, you guys see what's going on there in those top 3 notes? I'm actually getting a D major triad. And once again, this dominant here, this F13 flat 9, comes from that auxiliary diminished scale. And this is like, to me, one of the primary sounds that we get out of that scale when we're creating a dominant chord. So look, here's my lead note, F sharp. There's my second voice. There's my third voice down, right? So that forms a nice, beautiful D triad and second inversion. And then we get our 7th here and our root there. Beautiful, beautiful voicing. May sound kind of like Bill Evans, right? I mean, he wrote a lot of those type of voicings, right? So maybe let's see, how is that going to work coming off of this? We're actually going to have that F sharp twice, aren't we, in the voicing? Here's that C13 with the F sharp, and then here's the, right? And then I'm jumping all the way up in this last one to the C. I don't know why, I just wanted, well, actually I do know why. I'm going to maybe think about this in a little different way. So we have a B flat major 9 here. So I already have my substitute for the root. The other substitution that we can put in well, there's actually 2 other substitutions, right? We can sub a sharp 11 for a 5. I don't want that sharp 11 sound, though, in this chord. I want to keep this, kind of on the Ionian side of things. So I don't want to hear that. I want this to be more of kind of a 1 chord. So the other substitution we can do is 6 for 7. So I'm going to try, and this is going to work out really nice, you'll see. Substituting in a 6 for 7. So I'm actually putting a 7th category note here, but it's that 6 subbing for a 7. Next one down, I'm going to go ahead and put my 3rd. Next one down, guess what? I'm going to put a regular old 7th. Actually, let me back up and put that in the bass clef, just for consistency's sake. Okay. And then we would add our roots below that. And notice what happened here is by doing that, I have all perfect 4th intervals up here, right? With this beautiful root in the bottom. I would have to upgrade my chord symbol at this point to B flat major 13. And the reason I'd have to call it that instead of 6-9 is because I have that major 7th in there now, right? If it was missing the major 7th, I could get away with calling it B flat 6-9. But this is a pretty cool voicing, right? If we look at over here, we have all these 4ths. Beautiful diatonic and perfect 4ths, right? With a B flat in the bass. Beautiful, beautiful chord. Coming from the F. Maybe not the greatest voice leading in the world, but I like the sound of it. I think it's really nice. Okay, so that is the formula method of creating 5-way spread voicings. The second method that we're going to deal with is actually going to be, I think, probably pretty easy for you guys. This is just based on a simple drop 2 voicing. And here's the thing about this. We just spent all this time doing that idea of, voicing these from a formula. If you actually just write a drop 2 voicing and then stick a root under it, guess what? It's usually going to conform, especially if your lead note is a good lead note. It's just going to conform to our formula from method number 1. So let's kind of try that out for a second and see what happens. So look, we're going to create, here's what we do. We create a drop 2 voicing from the lead note. Once again, our lead note cannot be the root of the chord. Here I have a substitute for the root, which is fine. So you must, somewhere in the voicing, sub for the root category. There's actually an exception for that, but I'll talk about that when we get to the method number 3. And then you just add a root in the bottom voice above it. Once again, these two techniques, the one based on drop 2 and the formula technique, they tend to be most effective when that 3rd and 7th are in voices 3 and 4. But here's the cool thing, check this out. If your lead note is a good lead note, in other words, a extension or a 5th, it tends to work out nicely if we base our methodology on drop 2. So let's just go ahead and create a drop 2 voicing here. So that's our root category. Next one down would be the 7th, which I'm going to go ahead and drop. Right? So our next one down would be a G. Go ahead and drop that. Next one down would be our 5th category. Next one down would be our 3rd category. So look, there's a perfect drop 2 voicing. I mean, I could sub a D in for that E, but I'm not going to do that now. And then to complete this out, so there's our drop 2 voicing. I'm just going to throw in the root at the bottom of that, right? So if we're looking at the piano here, here's our lead note, B. We're going to drop the G down an octave. Next, whoops, I lost my note there for a second. Click out of that for a minute. Okay, here we go. So once again, back to the keyboard. Here's our lead note, right? Next voice down would be a 7th, which we're dropping down to here. Next one down would be 5th, 3rd, and then our root below that. Beautiful, beautiful 5-way spread voicing. Once again, has all the information in there that we need to know. And if we analyze this, according to our formulaic method, right? We have an available tension here in the lead. We have a 5th in the 2nd voice. We have a 3rd in that 3rd voice, a 7th in the 4th voice, and then our root in the bottom. So it actually conforms to that formula anyway, right? Now here I tried to do one that may be a little bit difficult, but guess what? This one's going to work out great. So here's an F sharp half diminished, right? So our lead note is a 5th category. Next note down would be 3rd. So I'm going to create a drop 2 voicing where I'm going to drop it down an octave, whoops, to that A, right? Next one would be a root category. And actually, so we have 2 substitutions for the root here. Remember, we can either sub a natural 9 in for the root in a half diminished. The other sub we can do that could be a little tricky is that 11th. And I wouldn't want to do that here for 2 reasons. Well, actually for 2 different reasons, depending on where you put it. If I put the 11th up here, it would be a half step against the lead, which I would like to avoid. If I put it down here, I'm going to get a flat 9 interval. So we don't want to put an 11th in this particular voicing. However, I'm going to go ahead and sub for, oops, let me try that again. I'm going to go ahead and sub for the root in this case and put in that natural 9. And that's going to add some nice color, some bright color to this chord. So there's my root category. Next one down would be my 7th category. And then to complete this out, we're just going to put in the root all the way down there. Look, we have a beautiful minor 10th interval here. If we look at this on the keyboard, it looks really nice, right? We have a C up here as our lead note, G sharp, and an E, which is actually an augmented triad, isn't it, right? Click off of that for a second, right? Very nice voicing. It's got some brightness in it, but it's got some nice color in it. Let's see if we can just knock the rest of these out pretty quickly. B7 altered. D natural is not the 3rd, it's the sharp 9, right? So that's a sub for the root. Next one down would be the 7th, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put a 7th. I'm going to drop the 7th on this one. Next one down would be the 5th category. Because it's altered, I think I'm going to go ahead and sub in a flat 13 for that. Next one down would be the 3rd category. So I'm going to put in D sharp. And that completes our drop 2 voicing. And then to finish it off, there we go. So that's kind of nice. If we look at that on the keyboard. Nicely spread out voicing. Nice colors in there. Oh, here's one where we put an 11th in the lead note. So if I create a drop 2 voicing here, that's a sub for the 5 on a minor 11th chord, right? So my next one down would be the 3rd. I'm going to go ahead and drop that an octave, put it down here, stick a flat on it. Okay. Next one down would be the root category, and in this sort of voicing, we have to sub for the root, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and sub the 9 for the root in that case. Next one down would be the 7th category, right? And then to complete the voicing, I would put my root in at the bottom. Once again, nice, beautiful spread voicing. So here's our lead note, A flat. Next note down would have been G flat, but I dropped that an octave for drop 2. Sub for the root, 7, root. Nice voicing. We have a beautiful D flat triad here on the top over that E flat chord. Next one, F13. I have a 9 in the lead. Next one down would be the, so a 9 subbing for the root. That means the next one down would be the 7th. I'm going to drop that an octave, put it down there. Next one down then would be the 5th category. Because it's a 13 chord, why don't we go ahead and sub the 13 in there? I think that would be a great idea. And the next one below that would be the 3rd. And look what we created here by doing that. Beautiful diatonic fourths, and I'm going to complete that voicing with the root down there. So let's look at this one on the keyboard. So we got a G here, up in the lead, diatonic fourth, diatonic fourth, diatonic fourth, root. Beautiful sounding voicing. Okay, so the only thing is when our tessitura gets low, so that's our based on drop 2, right? So our last technique here is really, really useful when our tessitura gets a little bit lower, because sometimes, we're going to have a hard time with a low note in our lead trying to create a spread voicing, right? So I'm not sure if this is Gary Lindsay's term or not. So what we could do is we could actually create a 4-way close voicing and then just go ahead and put a root under it, and we get still a beautiful pad type voicing. But maybe it's hard to define it as a spread at that point because it's not so spread out. But boy, these work really well as once again, pad voicings. Very similar to the drop 2 methodology. We're going to create, except this time we're going to create a 4-way close voicing from the lead note. Once again, the lead note cannot be the root of the chord. You have to sub for the root category in there. And then you're going to add the root in the bottom voice. And your voicing will have 2 root category notes, except for one exception, which it's over here, and we'll get to that in a minute. But once again, good when the tessitura of the lead is low, so I wrote some pretty low tessitura notes here. For instance, let's look at a B flat minor 9 chord here. Tessitura is not super low. We could actually do a drop 2 here, but I'm going to go ahead and do a quasi spread. So I'm going to create a 4-way close voicing on this. So that's a 5th category. Next one down is my 3rd. Go ahead and throw that in there. Next category down would be the root category. I have to sub the 9 in there, so we get that beautiful half step. Next one down, the next one down that we're missing is the 7. So you'll notice that this does not follow the hierarchy of the above so well, because we have a 9th in our 3rd voice, right? And that's something, if we look at our, formula up here, we don't have that available, right? So this is breaking the rule of that formula, but guess what? It sounds good, so we're going to go ahead and write it. So, and then we're going to complete it with our root down here, and guess what? This is like classic close voicing for the piano. And guess what? When you voice that in horns, it's going to sound really great as well. Okay. Let's continue along here. Here's one. Ooh, I put the 3rd in the lead here. Yeah, I'm not crazy. Actually, it's going to work out pretty well. So that's the 3rd. Next note down is our root, which we have to sub for. So I'm going to go ahead, because it's a flat 9 chord, I'm going to go ahead and sub in a flat 9 for that note. Next one down would be the 7th. Can't sub for the 7th here, right? Next one down would be the, it'd be the 5th, But I could, well, let's do this. Let's get a little bit fancy here, and we'll sub in a 13. I would have to then upgrade my chord symbol, right? And actually, that now puts us in that idea of the auxiliary diminished scale again, but that's fine. And this is really blowing our formula out of the water, isn't it, right? However, I think it's gonna sound good. Here's the thing, though. You might be tempted to put in that low C, but then at this point, look, we'd have way too much space between those two notes. So what we would want to do is actually put our low root there. So on the keyboard, it looks like this. Beautiful sounding chord, pretty packed, tightly together. Look, it's got an A triad in there. A little bit of dissonance with the 7th. Nice sounding chord. Let's continue along. E7 altered, not a 3rd. Once again, I'm pretty fond of that. Sharp 9, subbing for the root, right? So in 4-way close, our next one down would be 7th. Next one down, maybe I'll sub a flat 13 in there for our 5th. Next one down then would be a 3rd. And then we drop in our root below that. The right hand should look familiar to you guys. Whoops. Undo that. The right hand should look familiar for you guys, right? That's like a Lydian grip, right, with an E in the bass. Common thing that comes out of the 4-way close methodology. Here's one. F half diminished, so we have a 7th in the lead. Oh no, 7th in the lead. What are we going to do? Guess what? We're not going to panic. Next one down is the 5th. Next one down is the 3rd. And let's see, in this case, could we sub in that B flat? In other words, the 11th? We could actually do it. Let's try doing that and see what happens. So I'm going to put my B flat there, and then I'm going to put my A flat here. We get a pretty clustery voicing. Stick my root in down there. Let's see what that sounds like. So look, we get E flat, C flat, B flat subbing for the root, and then an A flat, which is the 3rd of the chord. Ooh, I like that a lot. That's a beautiful voicing. Once again, the notes up here, not very spread out at all, right? It's really almost can't call this a spread voicing at this point. It's more like just, once again, a 4-way close voicing with the root in the bottom, quasi-spread, right? Okay, one more here, and this is going to give us that exception to the rule that I was talking about. So here's a B fully diminished chord. The D is the 3rd. Oh, and this one's actually not going to work out so well. It's not going to work out how I like. I'm going to change my lead note, actually. I'm cheating. Here's a 5th, right? That's the 5th of a diminished chord. Next one down would be the 3rd. Next one down would be the root, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and sub for that root. I'll tell you what. I just figured out that my point is not taken. Guess what? You're going to have to sub the root in this case. Let me see if I could think of a case where you wouldn't have to do that. I guess, yeah, you'd always have to sub for the root. Always have to sub for the root. Even, so I'm taking my asterisk off of this now that I think about it. You always have to sub for that root because otherwise you're going to have 2 roots in the voicing. And it's not going to be 5-way anymore. So even on a diminished chord, there is no exception there. So I had to correct myself. All right, so what is the 7th on a B fully diminished chord? Well, it's like a A flat, right? Let's stick that in there. And then there's our B is the root. So if we look at this on the keyboard, right? We have just a little bit of tension here in our right hand. But we still get the, the character of that diminished chord with some color in it. So it's got a little chunkiness to it, but hey, works well. All right, hope this is good for you. Once again, please put any questions that you have in the discussion on Canvas. That way I can answer them for everybody. Chances are people have the same questions. All right, hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you soon.